we've added a 13th day. And when you look at the 13th day, plus the personal days, plus the time off, so for example, if you take a regular full-time employee, 10 years and over, they have, who's not a director, they have 13 holidays, 3 personal days, and 4 weeks of vacation. So basically, they have over 7 weeks of time off during the course of the year. If you're in a director's role, it equates to almost 8 weeks. So basically, almost 2 months of time off. So I had a conversation with Jeremy about this, and I asked that this be brought back. I think I mentioned that when I was in the private sector and they added Martin Luther King Day, we had discussions because obviously we all recognize the importance of that particular holiday. And the company decided we didn't want to add additional holidays, so we gave people a choice. You could either take a Martin Luther King Day off, or you could take President's Day off. Or you could use a personal day if you wanted to celebrate that. You know, Juneteenth is unusual. Again, it's an important date, a day in certain places, because it was the last day of slavery in the country when it ended in Texas. It wasn't really a day that I don't think was on most people's calendars until the last 12 to 15 months. Obviously, it has some significance, but I guess it gets back to the issue of what is the appropriate number of days off for our people. And one alternative would be to take away, if we're going to recognize Juneteenth, would be to reduce the personal days for full-time employees from 3 to 2, and from directors from 6 to 5. That way they could have the holiday, and yet the village would still have people working that additional day. So I just wanted to bring it back for discussion to see if there was any further interest in addressing this issue, and whether there was any interest at all in looking at this as an appropriate possibility, given the fact that we're talking about adding that extra holiday. So anyways, who would like to start?
I don't have anything. I'm good, I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. Molly, do you have any thoughts?
Thinking. So are you asking a question?
Yeah, I'm asking a question. Do we, if we're going to give, we've already kind of said we wanted to give the 13th, the Juneteenth as a holiday, but there was some conversation up here at the dais, some concerns about adding another holiday, another day off in light of what is a fairly generous vacation and holiday schedule already. So one way of addressing adding the additional holiday would be to take one personal day away. So the question is that something the council wants to consider and give guidance to the manager on as a matter of policy?
And our employees, they are able to sell back their vacation days in particular, yes? What about personal days? No. Do we know how many employees actually sell back their vacation days?
It varies from year to year. Usually you only have a couple that do it. I think this year we probably have a couple more because of COVID. So there's people that have more time than normal, but typically you're only looking at a couple employees each year. Probably ranges 2 to 5 employees.
Most of them want to take their time, right?
What about, I should probably know this, but is there sick time too, or the personal days for, like, if you have a doctor's appointment or that kind of stuff? And what is the sick time?
So they get sick time. I don't have the calculation for that. I can give it to you in just a second, but they get sick time as well. It's not calculated at the same rate that vacation is, less. And they have the personal days which are optional.
Kyle, you got some thoughts on this?
I do. So I think we should leave Juneteenth alone as a holiday, and I think that as a council we should, talk about all of the different benefits that our employees get with sick time, with personal time, and different holidays. I would, I'd like to try to set a precedent that as more days are added to national holidays, that they are just added as personal days versus we're actually recognizing those days, because then that way they don't use it, they lose it kind of a deal, but they still have the ability to take that holiday off, because there's gonna be more holidays coming. But I think that, looking at how much time an employee can bank, those vacation days is something that we need to look at too. Just all around, I think there's a whole area that the whole system can be improved for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked about this last time, we talked about the fact that, if somebody wanted to take this day off, they could use a personal day or a holiday to take it off, or a vacation day to take it off as well. But I think, as the manager pointed out, it's been recognized now by President Biden as a federal holiday. So I think it seemed to me that was the sentiment that kind of carried the day, that said, okay, let's go ahead and recognize it as well. But to your point, as you add these additional days, how much time off is reasonable? I mean, if somebody's getting paid for 10 months a year instead of 12, at what point do you say, well, wait a minute, from a fiscal responsibility standpoint, from an expectation of our employees, how much time is needed and how much time is appropriate? So.
Well, then you can get into, are we being competitive too?
True.
And
Don't disagree.
That has to be highly aware of that as well.
I'm fine with Juneteenth. I just struggle with if you just take the one personal day away just to balance it. I don't think the one personal day makes that big of a difference. If we were talking about more, maybe in the future, I don't really want to go down that path right now. But yes, I do agree, if the higher ups in our country decide to start throwing out holidays left and right, I absolutely want to look at it differently. Because, we can't have employees off for 6 months out of the year. That's kind of where, I just don't know if that one day taken away is really going to make that big of a difference. And I like that we actually offer our employees to sell their vacation time back, especially those that have family. I think it's an extra way rather than force them to use them.
I agree with you on being able to sell them back if they elect not to take them. Some people can't afford sometimes to go on vacation, and they can use the extra money in order to help them catch up on some of their bills, et cetera. So I'm in favor of them being able to have the ability and privilege of being able to sell them back should they elect not to. And as far as the personal days goes, to me, it's just an extension of your vacation days. So they're going to coincide, they're going to call in, I got a personal day, I got a doctor's appointment on Friday, or whatever the case may be, but, they're going to take them off. To me, it's just an extension of your vacation days. It's just termed differently, in my opinion. They still get paid for it, right?
Correct.
Just like a vacation day? Yeah.
So it's my understanding they can, on the vacation days, they can bank 4 weeks, and they're only allowed to sell 2.
Okay.
Correct. But yeah, you still manipulate it. My point is it's still, they're going to take a, personal day on a Friday or a Monday and get a 3-day weekend. I'm fine with that. If that's, however they want to do it. For me, it's personal day. Personal day, you don't really have to have any real, okay, well, I just feel like taking off today. That's a personal day. You don't really have to have anything to justify it. You can just call it, I'm taking a personal day.
But, yeah, the reason I posed the question was simply, because as far as selling vacation days back, I agree that's not an issue for me. I think taking some vacation during the course of the year is important to recharge batteries and that kind of thing. The issue was simply, as we allow for more and more time off, whether it's holidays, personal days, vacation, at what point do we reach a limit where we say, wait a minute, we don't want to go beyond this? Like I said, when you said 6 months, but we've got some people basically that work 10 months and have 2 months off if they choose to take it off. So that's the only reason I wanted to bring this up for discussion. I think, Kyle, you brought up a good point, which is it's probably a larger discussion. It wasn't meant for us to come to a resolution on the big picture tonight. It was just simply, with Juneteenth being specifically authorized, was there any kind of a consensus or whatever to make an adjustment vis-a-vis the personal days? But if there's not, then we'll just table it, and we'll, like I said, we can make this part of a larger discussion at a later date.
Jeremy, did they get Columbus Day off? Okay.
In some places they do, but I don't think,
That was kind of my point.
I don't think so here.
This
I don't
was
see it on
the
the
first
list.
federal holiday, added since 1884, is what we were told. So, I mean, unless
No.
they start rolling them out left and right now I'm okay with it.
Well, no, they've added Martin Luther King Day. They've added this one. So, Molly, did you have any?
Martin Luther King was added in 1984.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
did
think
you
that was
say
the last one.
1984? I thought you said 1884. I'm sorry.
1984.
Yeah, last one.
Molly,
Very
did you want to
special
add
day for
anything
me.
to the conversation? Okay.
No.
I'll have one question just for the record.
Sure.
Jeremy, do you think that having these additional day, or adding this additional day is going to hinder the ability to provide great service for our residents?
No, I guess that would be opposite. My question would be, what service have we failed on, or are slipping? I mean, I think, when I look at our staff, we have very dedicated staff here, and I can only really talk to the people that directly report to me. I mean, these guys are answering the phones on nights, weekends, vacations, even though I tell them not to answer emails, they still do. I mean, they're working, so, I mean, yeah, they're getting their vacation time, they may be on the beach, but they're still working, even though we don't want them to be. So I think we have very dedicated staff. I'd hate to, when we got staff members that come to all of our meetings and nights, when you talk about the 3 extra personal days, it's because of that we give them 3 extra personal days. So, when we start talking about reducing, benefits, we just gotta be very careful of that we're not punishing the people that work hard to look for those benefits. The second part of that is, municipal government, we'll set public safety aside for a second. Municipal government employees, they get benefits. I mean, they don't always get the highest pay, but, you got engineers, you got people who work on roads. They can go to the private sector and make a lot more money, but they don't have the perks that municipal government has. Municipal government, you don't get paid as much, but you got a lot more perks with pension and, health benefits. So that's the trade-off that we're talking about when you're talking about municipal government employees. So we just gotta be very careful when we maybe it's a bigger conversation, maybe it's a future policy that we set. I mean, I think it's a great suggestion, but, to take away what council has done in the past, let's be careful with that. That'd be my only advice.
And that's a very valid point in my opinion, because a lot of people like to work for municipalities and stuff because of the extra perks and stuff. Sorry.
Mary Gray.
Time's up.
I thought it was my time.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
It's been a long day, guys. I'm still hammering it out up here.
I was just gonna add, one more comment.
yes.
I mean, I think that's important to make sure that we're not reducing the services to our community. I think it's also important that we are taking care of our employees. It's that balance, but also being a good steward of the residents' money. So those 3 things are what I'm thinking about. So I appreciate you bringing this up. And I think that we can easily continue to talk about it. I don't think there's an easy solution.
No, I mean, you're right, and there is a balancing act to strike there, and I will say, even in the private sector, particularly in people with different levels of responsibility, I think what you'll find is people are dedicated and they work very hard as well. A lot of people, I know from my career, working on weekends, working nights, that wasn't an unusual situation. So, but I do think it speaks well to the dedication and commitment our people have. But you're right, Kyle, it is a balancing act. And the only reason I brought it up was, again, because there seemed to be, while we approved it, there seemed to be some concern again about the cost and, the number of days. So I just wanted to raise it again as a topic for discussion, but we'll defer it for a larger discussion at a later date. So.
Last point to that, as we talk about in the future, is that know that each bargaining unit, we've had to bargain that out with them.
Yes.
So we're only talking about 30 employees, give or take. The rest of it's all unionized. So
Yeah.
we just have to be mindful of that as we have future conversations.
And I appreciate you being honest with the staff members' productivity while they're taking those days, that they do answer the phone still if you need them. Because clearly if they weren't, that would be another issue, and we would absolutely have to relook at it. But right now, getting that feedback, again, taking away the 1 day while things are still going okay, isn't that drastic for me.
Okay. All right. That concludes item 1. Let's move on to item 2. This is a draft of the submittal to the state for funding of Tequesta Park. Jeremy, I'm going to let you kind of run with this for the moment.
So at the August meeting, we agreed to adopt a resolution 4-1 to simply request the state for funding on the improvements at Tequesta Park. based on a preliminary design. At the meeting, there was discussion, you know, we were working on a rendering, a scaled version with Kinley Horn. At the time of that agenda packet, we did not have the scaled version. This agenda item has, it's a little more, I guess, in depth. We do have a little bit more time because it's not, you know, not due to the state until after our next meeting. So trying to make sure that we have that scaled version in here. So this agenda item in the packet has you know, a cover letter, has the scaled version, has our probable cost in here that we can look at. And so I'm open to questions or comments.
Just one thing, the cover letter, I told Jeremy I was going to work on a few edits because I want to make sure that since we have support of all of our surrounding communities, and it is kind of a regional park, it's not just Village of Tequesta, that the cover letter kind of reflected that. So I haven't even had a chance to give this to Jeremy because I just worked on it today, having come back from vacation. But again, it's a draft. You know, we'll continue to work on this.
So it's different than this one that's on.
Yeah, well, it encompasses much of that one, but I did make some changes to it. Again, to try and make sure that we capture the fact that it isn't just Tequesta. You know, it's going to benefit Martin County, Palm Beach County. We've got support from multiple municipalities, including the counties. So I wanted to make sure that, you know, the letter reflected that it wasn't just for us.
I got a quick comment on that, is there any way that we could take and do some sort of survey for X amount of period of time, even if it's, you know, able to be able to do it, to determine what percentage of people from Jupiter use it, Martin County use it, Tequesta use it, and kind of determine percentage-wise of what usage from each area that is actually, you know, using the facilities, and then we can at least solicit maybe some potential cost for maintenance based on their percentage of usage. In other words, if we're using 65%, then we each 65% of the budget, and Martin County each 30%, and Jupiter each another, you know, 10%, whatever the case may be. Just an idea. I mean, rather than us footing the whole bill, you know, I mean, if we're only using half of it with half of our citizens, and Martin County's using 40%, then maybe they'd cough up 40%.
I would be hesitant because for the last umpteen years, our residents have been using nothing but Jupiter's parks. And we haven't paid Jupiter anything.
Yeah,
I mean, over and over and over. I mean, every game, everything has been at the Jupiter facility. Just a thought.
Yeah.
Been good for us. For most
Yeah, if each community starts charging the others,
Well, we might want to strike that comment.
that could be, yeah, I agree with Kyle 100%.
Thank you, Kyle.
Tough road to go down.
I serve the pledge of the council. You all want
Oh, Lord. Open up a can of worms with that one, huh?
Okay, let's get thoughts from everybody. Molly?
I'm just really hoping to see, I think is this gonna be on the council agenda next week?
Yes, it is.
So, I know, Jeremy, you guys have been working on it, but I really wanna see updated maintenance costs and a plan for how we're gonna pay for it, your expected revenue to offset those costs. You know, are we going to state for the annual reserve funds? That's been talked about. There's just some things I think we really need to close loop on still. A plan, schedule for public comment, how we're approaching that. And then it's still showing a skate park, and I know this is just preliminary, but I don't know why we would have a skate park on there when there's one at Constitution and have that in the budget.
There's, in the past, there was some discussion about should we move the skate park out of Constitution up to Tequesta, and I think that's why it got included here. But again, this is the idea is to have a master concept, but not something that's actually completely etched in stone. So we have, you know, you have the next few days to think about it. If there's a consensus that we don't want the skate park here, we can drop that out of this presentation. So there's time to make, you know, changes and modifications between now and the council meeting. And the important thing with this rendering is, as you can see, is that we've confined all the improvements to the area that is already recreational space. So we're not intruding into the natural areas that already exist at this point in time, which is the commitment that we made, when we started this process.
Yeah, I mean, just with the skate parks, we have one already, and then residents have said splash pad, other residents have said community gardens, so there's just, some other thing. I know that's why we're going to public comment, but just from a budget standpoint,
Well, and I think once we get a version of this that we can take to the state, we can take to to our legislative representatives, I think, as I said this to Jeremy, I think we should then begin to get the public comment immediately. So, I would be looking, if the council agrees, to have meetings on this, starting late September or October, and set up a series of meetings so that people can come in, see what we're proposing, get their feedback, get their comment, take that into account, and then any modifications or changes we make, and then we would update, our state reps in that accordingly.
I think I just like some of it to be ready to discuss at the council meeting, because we've been talking about this. When was our first meeting on the park? July, June? When was it? The first one? So, we've been talking about it for a while, so I think some of these things should be ready by the next council meeting, in my opinion.
But the council meeting is not gonna be to go through the design and chomp different details. This is gonna be voting on to send it to the state.
Right, but a lot of these things should be updated, because
Oh, I agree with
the
you.
maintenance cost before was for more fields, so are the maintenance
But
costs going down?
from my understanding though, the process would be any changes made again would have to go through this process and be voted on again.
Are we not, I thought it was gonna be on the agenda again next week, maybe
No,
I'm
it is
confused.
going to be on the agenda next week.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
it'd be to vote on what is being shown to us now. If any more changes come,
Oh, we're not voting, okay, we're not voting on anything tonight.
I know that.
Okay, so you've got
But
a
when she's
draft.
asking questions about where is this information and where's
Yeah.
that, if it gets sent to us, that's all adding to more of the conversation, and then you're just gonna vote and send it off when, I'm sorry, I still stand with we should have did this differently. I would have, I totally agree with the skate park, and I totally back those skaters. They don't skate all the way over there. They're gonna go to Constitution Park because they're gonna skate to the park. And the parking lot, I don't know if that actually is the size, the one that's over here in the middle. Is that the amount of spaces that would be required for how many visitors or spectators would be there? That data's not in here. Usually Nielsa runs that, right? That's the part that is missing for me, and I don't like asking the state for that much money when this whole design possibly could change once you go through your process of working with the community. And looking at financials, whether or not we
Yeah.
can even back that. And I know you guys know all
Yeah.
this already, I just wanna make sure that everyone's super clear, that's still where I stand.
I think the parking lot, Jeremy, wasn't that scaled to meet the requirements that we thought, or that the park would need?
Yeah, there's a standard for the number of spots needed per field, and so that's how they scale the parking lot, based on the number of fields like that.
So when you say a wholesale change, again, if we're going to preserve the natural area, the only footprint we can affect is that which is already the recreational component.
I understand, but
Yeah.
even on this design, where that second parking lot is, there's no more basketball courts.
That's correct. The basketball courts
See,
are.
I actually disagree with that,
Okay.
so.
So again, these are the kind of things you need to think about and get your input into Jeremy.
Oh, I have,
Okay, but all of us.
but we haven't had a good open workshop with community feedback and involvement as well. And I understand why this was
Yeah.
being put forward so
Yeah.
quickly, because we do want to try and get funds for it. I'm not disagreeing with that
Yeah.
either.
So, again, I think one of the reasons, the thought behind taking out the basketball courts is you're going to have the new community center. So you're going to have, an indoor basketball court there. You've got the basketball courts at Constitution Park. If we want to make sure we have adequate parking, the thought was, again, because we don't want to intrude on the natural areas, use those basketball current courts, for the parking spaces.
It makes good sense to me. Since we have two other facilities and stuff that have basketball courts available. Very good point.
But again, I understand what you're saying, Lord, but again, again.
For
as
sure,
you-
but just to add to that point, you know, when this skate park constantly gets discussed as being moved, it's over here, it's over there, what if we put up Remembrance Park? I know that poor part of the park always gets bounced around like it's nothing.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's possible. What if there was basketball courts at this park and you took away the one at Constitution Park because there are indoor ones there? I'm just saying there's so many options out there, and without the community that's actually be using the facilities with their feedback, that's why I still stand uncomfortable sending this.
Okay.
Because I guarantee that when we start doing our workshops with the community feedback, they're gonna have so many thoughts on this, and nobody's asked them.
Yeah.
What are you trying to suggest? I'm a bit confused. I'm trying to understand.
I'm just saying it's not, I mean, it's our job up here as 5 elected officials to make decisions for our community. But it's also our job to talk to them
Right.
and involve them, because they're the ones that are gonna pay for it, not the redo, but the maintenance upgrade.
Correct.
And they're also the ones to use it. I mean, I build something for my children, I ask them, what do you want?
Sure.
So that's kind of where I'm just back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the whole financial push. We need to ask the state. I absolutely want to do that. I just think this
So you're
wasn't done.
concerned about putting the cart ahead of the horse and trying
Yeah,
to do this?
and you know, I almost feel bad for the state because they're going to look at this. It's a preliminary. I don't know why anyone would approve, let's say, $8 million, even $4 million.
You know, Lori, we don't know why they do a lot of things.
I know, I'm just saying. And then we're gonna possibly, most likely go back to them and say, oh, well, now we wanna change this and this and this because our community came back, and it's just a lot of back and forth that I don't think needs to be done.
Well, there's gonna be a lot of back and forth on it, in my opinion, and once you get this thing out to the public opinion and stuff, I mean, and it's gonna be a good thing, though, you know, we're gonna get a lot of positive feedback, some negative feedback, and that's what we need, so we can try to understand what the bulk.
Yeah, totally, that's what I want. I want the good, the bad, and the ugly from our community that we represent, and we're making this for them. So why are we not asking them?
And we will ask them, as you know, and you know what the time frame is and why. So the objective obviously is to try and to go out and get that community input late September, October, into November. And then if there are any significant changes, we can amend the plan accordingly, and we can get it to the state. And we can give them an opportunity then to review it. Again, there's nothing lost here. I mean, if they don't like it and they say no, all we're out is, you know, the hours we put in to make this effort. If they like it and say yes, as we've said, you know, maybe we get a couple million, maybe we get 4, maybe we get the whole thing. Okay, but I think there is a clear need in the community for this. We've got state legislators in Senator Powell, Senator Harrell, Representative Snyder, who are, you know, strongly behind this. We've got the other community, surrounding communities that are supporting this. I think it makes all the sense in the world to go for it. And again, even if it's not perfect, but if we have something that we're comfortable with that is representative, like I said, if it changes, it changes. But I think we have to be able to go forward with something reasonable. And when you look at what it's currently used for, which is the baseball stadiums, the pickleball and tennis, which we already have, you know, the playing fields, it's consistent with what we have. It's just a significant upgrade to the existing facility.
I get that, and I absolutely, no matter how this goes and how it's voted on September 9th, they absolutely, no matter what, want to move forward with community workshops and get that
Absolutely.
going. And, you know, to reiterate the whole double of activity areas, pickleball courts are on here.
Yes,
They're at Constitution Park, painted on the basketball court, and they're going to be inside the gym.
they're already there, by the way.
I know.
Oh,
So they're inside the gym. So, I mean, they're everywhere. We're going to have doubles
yeah,
of everything.
yeah.
So again, with community feedback, we can feel out which ones are gonna need doubles, which ones are gonna be the most popular.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
So I'm very excited. We definitely need to go forward with community workshops and start figuring out how this design is gonna change.
So let me ask one question. Is there a consensus to eliminate the skate park from this?
I mean,
Or
again,
do
I
we
mean, I
wanna
agree,
keep it-
Lori, we need public input, and we need to have something, a placeholder for budget.
So leave
I
it-
mean, versus you could do a skate park, you could do, like I said, I've heard from residents a splash pad, I've heard from residents a community garden, like what's gonna be the most expensive of those options that we have gotten some minimal feedback on from residents, and from a budget standpoint, we have to have something in there.
And I
But
think-
again, this is
Yeah,
part
I
of the
think
public
that
comment
those
process.
workshops with the community are gonna give us what we can afford. Because if they're not asking for really expensive things, then we can go, let's choose the top however many that they really want, and then we can get numbers on how much would it be to maintain these and see what we actually can afford. And I'm not gonna put some together and be like, we're gonna do this, and then go back and tell our residents, we can't do that. I mean, we have to be open with them.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, listen, we will be very transparent.
Say, you guys are all asking for a splash pad. Well, guess what? We understand that might be your number one ask, but here are the numbers to it. And this is what it would take. We don't have that. Would you be, let's work on a solution where to find that money.
Yeah.
If we can't afford it, we might have to tell them no. If we can't afford it, we have to pick and choose. But again, that all goes into a community workshop.
Yeah. And again, as soon as we have something we can take to the state, I agree, we then open it up to the community and we push aggressively to get that community input so that we can make any necessary modifications as this is working its way through the legislative committee process.
Well, I want to think big picture, because, I mean, the skate park and the playground, these are really small potato items of the whole thing, because are we even allowed to change the use and the intent of the park? So like, with community input, can the baseball fields and soccer fields even change? That's what do we get back from the community, and does the state even allow you to change the use? Say like we get feedback and no one even wants this at all. Are we even allowed to change the use? Like, big picture, what are we looking at?
We would have to go to the state planning agent. I mean, Jeremy's talked to the state planning agency, maybe I'll let him ask this question, but my understanding is if the use is relatively consistent with what currently exists and the footprint's relatively consistent, they're gonna be fine with it. If we wanna make some major changes, I think the state planning agency would at least have to take a look at it. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. I mean, if we start cutting into trees and stuff, it's gonna be a fat no, but, I mean, as long as we keep the use as recreation, I mean, we can change it. It has to go through like a review process and some public feedback on their side, or they have to post it to their website for a couple weeks to get solicit feedback. So there is a process on their side as well, but he told me it could be done.
Where the skate park is on this layout right now, what is there right now?
Grass.
Grass. I
It's
think.
grass?
Yeah.
There's no trees?
Yeah, that's towards the front entrance, and I think there is grass in that
I mean, I don't think it's
particular
gonna
area.
hurt our feelings, obviously there's some budget constraints because there is a swale up there. We've had to do some dirt work and some stormwater work up there, so, I'm not super happy with that was on the other design. So when we gave it to Kinley Horn, they put together a rendering with all the, all the facilities that we wanted in there on the other design. That was part of the 2010 design as well. So they put it all together and tried to make it all work. So.
I mean, when you talk about skate park, I mean, I try to look at it as a whole too, and I want to avoid doubles, but if it's something that is very popular at the time and can be placed in and transformed as the demographic changes and the uses change, when I think about that skate park though, I don't think we need two, and I still support it being at Constitution Park or somewhere else inside of Tequesta, because even just the other day, a group of kids rode together to the skate park. I would never want kids going that far over on town. But again, this all goes back to feedback.
Yes.
So that's where I stand. I'm not against asking the state. I do still stand with we should have did this differently. But I definitely want to move forward with workshops no matter what.
If the opportunity were there to do it differently, we would have. I can assure you of that.
And I
But-
do want to make sure that when we do workshops, we do them when everyone's kind of around. I don't want to
Yeah.
throw them right in the holidays when everyone's bouncing
No,
around.
I think we would try to do them in October. People will be here, people will be back. Some of the seasonal residents will even be back at that point in time.
Just
So,
always got to think of them all.
Kyle, you haven't said too much yet.
I see this as a 2% chance of making this happen. And
there's
I
that too.
think that we should at least continue to move forward. I think Mon made some great recommendations. It'd be great to have those journal numbers. But I think the overall goal is to just send this idea up to the state. In the meantime, continue to work through the process of identifying the nuts and bolts of what exactly our residents want. I know I asked a group of about 20 people, and I got a bunch of feedback of good things to share. And most of it was, this is awesome. So I think that our job here is to move this ball forward to the state and see if we can have a 2% chance of getting this. And if we get it, great. If not, we have a long-term plan of how we want to move forward after we have all this community feedback. And each year we can maybe continue to ask, and maybe next year will be 5% chance of getting it. So that's just me. I think we can spend a lot of time on this, but I think we should just keep seeing if we can maybe get a winning lottery ticket.
Well, I hope we have more than a 2% chance of something, but we'll see how it plays out. Like, so the state is probably in its best financial position in years, and probably in a better position than it might be well in the future to undertake this, but who knows? I mean, a lot of good ideas come to the state, and they never go anywhere. So I agree with you. It's worth a shot. We move it forward, and we'll see what happens.
Are we gonna need updated support letters? Because if there's a date on that plan, is it gonna be a problem that the support letters are dated previous?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mo, and I think that's something we could ask everybody to update for us.
And then Jeremy, I know I had asked to get an idea of what artificial turf and pervious pavement would be. That'd be nice to know on the budget.
I haven't sent it out to you guys because it's kind of hot off the press, but I have got those numbers. I think the proposed one here is like 10 million. It works out to like 13 million total. Basically, the cost of the field's double. So I can send you guys an updated so you guys have that to chew on prior to the meeting next week, and so we can consider. So the two things that I looked at was the field turf and the pervious pavement, because I know we talked about that option. So I put in those alternates, and it worked out to like $13 million ask versus 10.
Would the maintenance on that be less?
It's about the same. I mean, the same. Really, your maintenance cost. I don't know about the pervious pavement part of it, but the field part of it, your maintenance costs are still there. You still got to clean it, degum it. I mean, there's still costs that come with that. So
okay.
Everything that I've looked at, and you can talk to somebody who has those fields, they said the cost for the thing go down. They still budget the same amount.
Yeah, the other thing to look at that too is the insurance cost, because I know years ago the injury rate was higher on the turf fields than it was the artificial grass than it was on a natural turf. I don't know if that's still the case, but that would be something to look at too. All right, do we have? Are we comfortable moving this forward?
Sure.
We'll address it at the next council meeting. Do we have anybody who wants to speak to this?
We do. We have Mr. Mark Sapiri.
Okay, Mark.
Thank you. So, Mr. Prince, actually, your first comment was an excellent comment, and you should keep in mind Jupiter has over 10 times the population of Tequesta. Tequesta is already pulling its weight with the rec we have. The parking lot is easy. We don't need the field, so you don't need the parking lot. We don't need that many fields. So there are reasonable options for Tequesta Park. The proposal you're considering is not among them. The exorbitant maintenance costs will be a huge burden for the village. The profligate construction costs are a huge waste of money for the state of Florida, and the process under which the council has led this discussion has resulted in a huge waste of time, has created risk of terrible outcomes for the village beyond the boundary of the park, and this is a big problem. Your process has denied Tequesta taxpayers the opportunity to consider the ramifications of this terrible proposal, or to think about reasonable alternatives for this park and for the village. The process has been especially egregious because Tequesta is a small community. It's easy to organize meetings to consult residents. So looking at the latest drawing, there are numerous problems. Extra parking lot is ridiculous. The proposed extra parking lot tells you everything you need to know about this wasteful plan. This plan is in fact not designed for the residents of Tequesta. Tequesta does not need an additional 125 parking spaces at a cost of nearly $1 million. We do not need all the pavement that is in this design supporting that extra parking and all the unnecessary structures. A reasonable design for the village would have fewer than 7 fields. Moving the skate park from Constitution to Tequesta Park is a terrible idea. It would be useless for the neighborhood kids who skate. A concession stand, batting cages are unnecessary clutter. A reasonable proposal would not encompass any of these unnecessary expenses, and they're the fruits of a process that's being totally contemptuous of what residents actually want, devoid of careful study, blind to the numerous adverse effects of this kind of development project on the unique life of this community. This project will adversely impact the life of this community beyond the boundaries of this park. The massive maintenance costs alone will hamper the village in its future decisions. And as far as comprehensive urban planning goes, this council could not impose a more cookie-cutter, standardized, homogenized offensive development prospect on a substantial municipal asset. A design which in its economic effects would also entrain disruptive development trends throughout the rest of the village, is disdainful of vital community interests, destructive of everything that makes this village uniquely desirable. You've given scant consideration to these issues. You've afforded residents no opportunity to think about them, the consequences, let alone to comment on whether they represent a vision of this village that residents want. But of course, residents will have to pay the massive maintenance costs and suffer the morphing of Tequesta into the surrounding development blob that everybody comes to Tequesta to escape. Even families who are committed to organized sports, and I know many, will oppose this plan. Families who live in the village understand it is more important to prioritize Tequesta as a safe and healthy and stable, locally focused home. A home with its unique community life. It's easy to see that this plan does the opposite in its pursuit of making Tequesta a regional sports tourism destination.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Did you have anybody else, Mary Ann?
We have Marcia Nielsen.
Okay, I'm a little confused. Is what I'm hearing right, that you can take a proposal and give it to the state and say, this is our proposal, but it's only proposed, but we're gonna change it. Is that correct? You can do that to Tallahassee?
The process that they go through is it goes through legislative committees before, and then it's got to be voted out of committees, which takes place at the end of the year. Then it goes to the legislature. So we can put forth a proposal, and while it's under consideration in the committees, if we need to make modifications during that period of time, we can make modifications through the
Okay, so I'm
individuals
sitting
who are
on a committee and I'm
responsible.
looking at your proposal, and all of a sudden somebody comes in and goes, oh, that's not what they want, they want it this way. You know, it just seems like we've got the cart before the horse here, because you don't really know what your proposal is, because you're gonna have workshops, and your whole proposal can change, and unless your timing is the sweet spot, you're not gonna be able to change it. I mean, there's gotta be a point where the state says, okay, what are we funding? I mean, that's like me going into the grocery store and saying, well, you know, I have this, but oh no, public says, no, I'm substituting that one. You know, I just don't get how you think this is gonna fly in Tallahassee. Now, you know, I don't know a thing about Tallahassee, thank God, and maybe you know, but it just seems to me kind of backward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bradford.
Tom Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail. In regard to the skate park, I don't think you need two, and I think that you should keep the teenagers close to home. Yes, these people, these teenagers who skate, think they're cool, and they do some things that parents would not approve of, and I think the opportunity to do those sort of things would be greater in Tequesta Park, and the parents of skateboarding teenagers of Tequesta would prefer that you keep it in the village and close to home, where it'll have more likely a higher amount of authority looking over them from time to time. The comments that I have currently about the plan are a batting cage, a series of batting cages. Those fields barely constitute the minimum for softball fields. So, I mean, I don't get it. That seems like a waste to me, because if it's really only going to be softball, or maybe Little League baseball.
Little League.
It just seems like, you know, they can go to, it just seems like silly to me. The other thing is, I don't see any water detention ponds anywhere. Where is this stormwater runoff going to go to from the parking lots and so forth? I thought there was a storm detention pond somewhere near the existing parking lot, but I don't even see that on the map. But And maybe you've got pervious concrete proposed. I doubt it. I think I just heard Jeremy say that, you know, that and something else was another $3 million. So maybe some of it's being directed into the medians in the middle of the thing, but it doesn't seem like enough based on my knowledge of stormwater detention pond requirements of South Florida Management District. And the last thing is the most important thing. It seems like everybody has forgotten something very important, including all 5 of you. At a previous workshop, you instructed through consensus, if you can do such a thing, for the town manager, the village manager, to get a quote for a Tequesta Park charrette. And now you're all talking about a series of public meetings and so forth. What happened to the charrette? It's on tape. We know you said it, and that's what you all wanted. And now you're talking about, I mean, these people all, this room is available to come and comment. How many members of the public do you have here today? 5? Mm-hmm. This is not sufficient. You said you would do a charrette. What's the quote for the charrette? That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
I'd like to say something. I know I'm getting old. My mind's not very good. I don't recall ever being in favor of charrette for the corridor out there north of the park. So maybe the recording will prove me wrong, but I've never been in favor of spending the $100 and something thousand for the other charrette, and I don't ever recall being in favor of doing a charrette for the park there. So I'd be kind of curious to roll that back and see if it's there or not.
I think there was a comment, Kyle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Kyle mentioned of the desire to get the public input and the possibility of doing it in a charrette format.
Correct.
Combined with the other, or just going out directly and conducting our own public meetings just like we did with the community center. And so I think the key point was making sure we had sufficient and adequate public input.
That's what I thought that we'd agreed to, was having the public involved in it and creating our own in-house type charrette, but not having someone coming in and pay someone to do a charrette was the way that I understood it.
It's a matter of timing as well as cost.
I
So
think Mr. Allen had the answer to that, because after Kyle made that suggestion, I believe you found out if pulling or adding Tequesta Park to the charrette that we were looking to do would make a difference in cost.
Yeah, so
We never actually discussed that part
There was 2 parts to that
afterwards.
whole conversation. One was, to see what it would cost to add that or be a part of that. And then we had the conversation about trying to reduce the cost of the charrette. After talking with the Treasure Coast Planning, they didn't feel like the charrette and the park, there was a lot of synergy in that conversation. And so when we talked about reducing the scope of work for that charrette, that was the one they offered up. That wouldn't be there wouldn't be a lot of synergy there. So we did explore that option, and so we did not pursue that. And that's still open for discussion. We haven't voted on that process yet, so that could come back to you guys, and you guys say absolutely not, bring back the park. But at this stage, staff's not recommending based on my conversation with Treasure Coast Planning.
So my answer to you, Mr. Bradford, to that is, my apologies if I kept using the word workshop tonight. I was just trying to imply a meeting by itself, whether in more than one, that would be solely focused on parks, not attached to a workshop like this where we have multiple things on the agenda. It doesn't have to be called workshop. It could be called something else, whether we call it charrette or not. So my apologies. I was just using that word so it be identified as open and casual, and it won't pertain voting on those workshops or get-togethers to get feedback.
okay.
And I'll just say real quick, I'm comfortable with the conversations that we've had, that we will get that feedback as efficient for, I believe, doing a good job for this project.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, moving on to the last item, Paradise Park. After the last council meeting, I met with
Can
Beth.
I add one thing?
Oh, sure,
real quick?
go ahead.
There's a gentleman that lives on Tequesta Park. Is anybody talking about, because he just got a really nice playground? What's the plan for him or her?
I think if we, ultimately, if we decide that we're going to move forward master plan and that house is not part of it, there is no contract for him to be there. The state says that it's at the discretion of the village of Tequesta. He does not have an agreement with the Tequesta. The state says nobody else in the state of Florida has an agreement like that, and that's at the discretion. So there will be a conversation if that's where we move forward. I think the gentleman, he opens the gates and he, closes the gates and, kicks people out at the right time. He's never been a problem out there. There's never been a reason to move him out because of that long-standing agreement. However, if it's not part of our master plan, we may consider that.
That's a really good point, though. Has anyone even,
I
knock,
looked
knock,
into it
knock?
Because
Okay, that's a really good point,
I
Kyle.
was told it was just he had an agreement, and the state said absolutely no, I didn't have an agreement,
So he should be part of our big
Yeah,
discussion
yeah.
on it.
Great opportunity to come in and talk. It's got a pretty good deal.
All right, so moving on to Paradise Park. So I had a chance to talk with Donna and Betsy, and I explained to them the council's position after the last meeting. And I said basically what the council was looking to do is simply go month to month through the chili cook-off and then turn it back over to them. What I discussed with them today was a little different approach, and I wanted to just bring it forward to you to see if this is something you would consider. They said they're open to this, so it's up to us as to what we would like to do. What I said to them, of course, they're aware that the grant funding, for the grant we were going to apply, it was not funded this year. I explained to them that for the next year's budget, it may or may not be funded. We'll find out whether it's included in the budget in January. We'll find out whether the state's approved it by the end of February, and then there's still a time period where the governor could either veto it out or he could allow it to flow through. So I said, would they be open to the idea of a lease that would have two key dates? And this would be a definitive lease, and they could not sell it during the lease term. So the right of first refusal doesn't even become an issue because they're not going to be accepting any offers. So what would happen is we would extend the lease from September until, let's say, May, by which time we would know, is the grant program funded, and is the governor amiable to letting that grant program stand? If the answer is yes, then the lease would automatically be extended to allow us to apply for the grant and give us time to receive the grant. So it would extend to, let's say, April or May of 2023. So I said to them, I said, look, I know you're looking to simplify things. I know you'd like to get the park sold. I said, but if it isn't, there's no urgency, and you've expressed the desire that the village acquire this park, would you be open to this type of arrangement? Now, what they would want to know is that there's a clear intent on our part to purchase it, and they would want to have, a purchase price identified within the lease agreement. But if we agree to this, if the grant funding doesn't come through, then the lease would expire April or May, and they're free to market it. If it does come through, we have time to apply for it, again, see if we receive it, and if we do, then we can execute, on the agreement. So I'm just throwing it out there for you guys to think about. We don't need an answer today. I did tell them, however, that we would vote on it at the next council meeting, and we would give them an answer by the end of next week as to whether our intent is to move this agreement forward, have the village attorney draft an agreement, and then, offer that up to them. So that's where we are.
Do we have numbers for going, I know if it was just going to May, like you were just describing.
The lease last year was $42,000. Their costs have increased about $1,000 a month. So they would want us to cover that cost. So it would be, I think last year we were paying, what, $3,500 a month? So this year it would be $4,500 a month. Through that May, so it'd be 4 months, May, we'd be looking at 9 months initially. And then if the grant is funded, we would carry it forward probably for like almost another year.
I have a question for Mr. Island that I was going to ask before we even presented that. What does it cost the village? Well, the village uses the property, it's part of the lease. But if an outsider wanted to come and run, excuse me, an event for one day, what is the cost to rent that property from the village? Or how does that work?
Well, assuming they're going to, it's going to be over 200 people, they would just just come to council for an approval for a large special event.
Okay.
I mean, we don't have a fee set for Paradise Park, so, an ideal would be, sponsored or, by the village, but I don't know that we've ever had anybody wanna go out there and rent it where we paid, where somebody's paid for it. We don't have a set fee schedule for the park.
Okay. I'm just thinking there is interest of possibly 2 spring events, but they're Tequesta people, but it's not part of the village. But they would be able to put something together for a day on that property, just to give it some use throughout. I don't have any more details worked out or anything from their end, but they were just wondering what would it cost them to even use the property for a day, for a few hours for an event. That's why I was asking, to give, that way we're not just focused on November, just 2 events in November.
I would say probably more
Give some actual use to it.
The public safety part of it, any staff, that would be needed or something like that. I mean, we'd have to look at those fees, but other than
Okay.
that, I mean, for the actual use of the park, that's at the discretion of council.
So, I mean, if there's interest in this, we can ponder it and put it up for a vote next Thursday. If there's no interest, then I'll just go back to them and say,
So
no.
really, we have to have a vote at least to extend it for 2 months, because we don't have, as of September 8th, the lease is up.
That's
So
correct.
we have to extend it, I'm assuming we've all talked about extending it through November. So at the very least, the village attorney will draw something up for month-to-month contract through November. And then at that council meeting, if you guys, as somebody wants to motion to extend it longer for a longer period, so just really put your minds to it if that's what you want to do. But at this point, from what I'm hearing, the agreement that we'll draw up is until November, unless I hear something different.
Yeah, and that would be to be voted on specifically, but then if we agree that we want to pursue this opportunity at the council meeting, we would then direct the village attorney to draw up an appropriate agreement to take it beyond that point in time. So, again, the only answer I would look for tonight is if everyone says they're not interested in pursuing this course of action, let me know. Otherwise, we'll bring it back on the next council meeting for you to actually vote formally on.
I'm not interested.
What, didn't Jupiter acquire some green space this year, and they did a bond or something? Is that something, we don't even probably have time for
I think
anything
a $3
like?
million bond in the past.
It's not,
I can answer the second part, we don't have time for it.
There's no time for it.
If they get time, I doubt. I mean, obviously, they're willing to hold it for enough period of time, and we wanted to.
10 years ago.
oh, 10 years ago? I thought it was recent.
And I think
It was-
they're
They
ready
did
to
the
renew
bond.
one.
Oh,
A long time ago, and they had this cash.
Yeah, they put a bond
Got
issue
it.
through that they had
Okay.
a pot of money that they could use for certain things. So this, I mean, again, the benefit of this obviously is if we get the grant, we can acquire the land. If we don't get the grant at any stage, we release it, it goes back to them and they're gonna look to sell it.
the hard one, if we get the grant, and I just feel like we're approving, we're not cutting costs anywhere. And this one, I mean, it's in the past, but I would have a million years rather gone to state for this, because it's Tequesta, we would have owned it. We thought at the time we
And
could go
that's,
for the grant, so there's nothing we can do about that.
right,
but-
well, and the issue here is because we do own it and it's within the village, it's a tough argument to make to the state that you should be buying this on our behalf, whereas Tequesta Park's a different situation because it is state-owned land and we only lease it. So what you really, it's really a matter of, is it worth continuing to pay for the lease of the space to give ourselves the opportunity to potentially acquire the park? They're not going to sell it out from underneath us, so they've said, if we come back to them with this proposal, they have to obviously they have to sign off on it as well. But if they find the proposal acceptable and they said they're open to it, it gives us the opportunity to continue to pursue the grant, knowing that if we're successful with the grant, we can acquire the land. But there is a cost to doing so, and the cost is $4,500 a month for potentially 18 months. So you're looking at, about $80,000 over the next 18 months. Kyle, you said you're not interested?
I feel better if we actually used it. That's why there's been 2 interests to try and help if there's some usage of it. And I think where they were getting at was, if there's a fee, what does the village pay per month? They would almost cover that to kind of help things financially. But that would only be 2 different events, so that could even be 2 different months, and that's not covering enough to May.
Yeah,
This is,
correct me if
Otherwise,
I'm-
we're just buying time.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the lease agreement is basically, they pay their property tax, we pay it back to them.
and they pay
maintenance.
property taxes and insurance.
Yep.
And you're right, we're covering that cost. So you're right, you're buying time. The question
So
is,
instead of that, we would be getting that money now.
we would keep the money, but we likely lose the opportunity to acquire the property. If we lease the property, you're right, we're buying ourselves time, and we're keeping that opportunity alive to be able to pursue the grant and procure that property using grant money.
So we could spend $80,000 for a potential, or we could receive $80,000.
That's pretty much the choice. And then that, the likelihood is that land will get sold off and developed.
And then we might get more,
How would we get more?
because it's developed.
It's developed, we get some property taxes, but again, then we, of course, we don't have the ownership of the land, and we don't have the opportunity to develop that into an additional park space.
We have a lot of control over what's built there.
We have control within the code. Remember, we're quasi judicial. If they meet code, they can build what they want.
If it's passed.
We are quasi judicial. If Keith were here, he would tell you what I'm telling you. If they meet code, it's kind of like the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If they meet code, they can build it.
It's just some expensive time to buy. I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not saying it's inconsequential. It's just depending on whether you feel that the opportunity to acquire the land, hopefully at little or no cost, is worth the expenditure of $80,000. And then we do have use of it for whatever the remaining term is.
And if we acquire it, can we develop it?
We can do whatever we want with it. I would want to.
Can we financially have the ability?
I would want to see it
It's set
done as a
for a
park, but,
It's for a long time.
so
And you wanna get
do
the
we
revenue
want
from
to, are we saying there's enough interest to put it on next week's agenda, or do you, I mean, I would like to see us continue to have this opportunity, so I would be a yay. You're saying you're not interested?
Well, no matter what, there has to be a vote to get through November, correct?
Correct.
And I'm in favor of doing that, and I think we should absolutely do that.
Well,
Yeah. I think we need to do that for our residents.
but beyond that point in time, are we saying no, or are we saying you want to think about it for the next week and come back and address it at the next council meeting?
I have no problem thinking for another week, but I definitely don't want to just buy time that expensive. I can do my own little conversation and see if maybe the 2 people that expressed doing 2 events next year, if they had any other clever ideas, funding wise. They're big events, not Tequesta Fest big, but donating. I mean, I would favor sitting on it for a week, but I'm not gonna spend $54,000 for time. We can put that money somewhere else.
Bruce, Molly, what are your thoughts?
I feel like it's a lot of money spent for if, and I really, really just like to see that property go. And not have the opportunity to do a cool park there, some kind of urban park, but I just don't see any other opportunities for maybe grant, if it's even funded again next year. And then it'll sit for a long time.
And if it's not funded, then our obligation would be, 9 months. If it is funded, then obviously we'd see it through and apply and see if we can be successful with it.
I'm probably not in favor of extending lease past November.
Okay, so you're a pass. Kyle, you're a pass. Lori, are you a pass?
I'm leaning towards passing on spending that much on time,
Okay,
yes.
so you're leaning. Bruce, what's your thought?
So, that's just a lot of money that we're having to pay every year. you know, for the use of it, essentially for what, 2 events?
One event.
Well, I mean, people do occasionally use it from the community, but you're right,
Yeah.
it's not.
One
But you also have to consider
Just one?
what it is right now.
I thought there was 2.
Well,
There's
the
2
chili-
events, but
chili
one
cook-off.
is through the Village of Tequesta, the other one is we support the chili cook-off.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, so.
Yeah.
That's what my point was, like, if we used it more, it would be easier to say, well, we use it throughout the year.
Well, and again, it's basically an undeveloped land, so its uses are limited at this point in time.
I believe we do have public comment too.
So,
We've looked down like every single avenue. There's no other opportunities except the one grant that wasn't funded this year.
That's the
It's a
only,
Jeremy
that's
question,
the only
maybe?
program.
I've
I'm aware of.
searched, I haven't seen any. If anybody else finds one, I'm open.
Now, if you know a wealthy individual in town who would like to donate the funds. Okay.
Or a group of them,
All right, so
but
we
might
got-
take an event to
We got
bring attention to.
one yes, 2 no's, 1 maybe. Bruce, it's up to you.
Well, you won't even vote on it till next.
Well, we won't vote on it until next week, but if it's clear that it's no, we won't
Consensus
even,
at this point, one
we
way or
won't even
another.
put it
I
on
gotcha.
the agenda.
Nothing you can do.
Yeah, there's no, we can,
Let's
there's
move
no
on.
consensus at this point. We'll bring
Yeah.
it back to the agenda. If somebody wants to amend it at the meeting, you can, or if you want to take it to a future workshop to look at it. But without a consensus, we can't, you know, we're not taking a vote tonight, so.
Okay.
Can we, I think there's public comment.
Yes, we have
I would
some.
like
Oh,
to hear
okay.
what they have to say.
Sure.
Mr. Marsapiri? Want to go first? I don't mind.
Hi, I'm Jessica Namath. Sorry I'm late.
Hi,
20
Jessica.
Shady Lane. I just wanted to touch on this piece of property that I do think could potentially attract a lot of interest in the future. Like you said, if people realized it was available to be used. But I have been blown away by seeing how many kids are out there recently playing. Is it the Harvey School that is in there?
Yes.
That utilizes those fields for their recreation. I mean, there are tons of kids that I've watched and taken pictures of. I'm happy to show you guys throughout the week because I was doing a lot of work on Bridge Road with one of the shops that was there. And I couldn't believe it because like a lot of people, I didn't think that it ever really got utilized, but I was so happy to see all of the kids and the different sports they're playing and every day that I was driving by there. So I know we've talked about the urban, having some sort of a park or an amphitheater or having it as a potential for a town center, but again, I think that it's green space worth fighting for and open space worth trying to keep, and if there's any possibility of extending that in the future or finding means or ways to continue brainstorming and leaving that open and that opportunity there for us as a village instead of losing it, I think that that would be wonderful, and I do think that there are a lot of residents that do use it, and we might need to explore that a bit more and see how often and, you know, what their parents or families or people think about using that as well. So, again, I just think that we should not give up on that and see, again, if we can get grant money for it. I think that would be the best avenue personally.
Okay, thank you, Jessica.
Yes.
Superior Country Club. Okay, I would like to pick up on something Ms. Young said, because I think this is important, talking about the Jupiter and the pocket parks. And we're seeing this in a lot of municipalities, because a lot of municipalities realize they've developed too much. And so a first important idea, I think, is seeing how this connects to the Tequesta Park discussion and realizing there's an alternative vision for the village, which I think we are not going to have an opportunity to see even if we move forward with the current plan for Tequesta Park. I want to tell you this alternative. You drive around in the evenings and I see kids playing on the sides of the road, sometimes with their fathers, with friends. They're playing pickup games. Pickup games are really great for kids. It's a lot easier for them to do that if there would be more pocket parks scattered throughout the village. We could do something like that instead of wasting money on the maintenance cost, $20 million over the next 20 years. With this concept of Tequesta Park, it would make this much more of a home and much safer, much more unique than anything else out there. And I would say much more useful for the residents and for the families who live here. And really serve building a close-knit community in a different and meaningful way that I think would really increase the value of the village. So I think there's the same thing going on with Paradise Park. I think Mr. Bradford was exactly right in his characterization. Municipalities can't be in the business of developing a city center. If you think the code is deficient, it's your responsibility to fix the code. I looked at the code, other people have looked at the code. We think it should be possible for this council to administer a beautiful city center, beautiful village center with a beautiful park space. And under the comprehensive development plan, there's a huge latitude for requiring this from a developer. And quasi-judicial just means that now you're not making the law, you're applying the law. If you think there's an issue with the code, then fix it. The municipality doesn't need to incur that cost. You make the code do that work, and you provide clear guidance to developers so that they understand when they come to Tequesta, they make a beautiful space so the kids who go to school here have a beautiful place to play. You don't need to spend millions of dollars to do that. But the important idea I want to circle back to, which is a reason why this process for Tequesta Park has been horrific, is that all of these issues are connected. And the massive expenses that we're about to incur for Tequesta Park will have far-reaching ramifications to the detriment of the village.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay. Oh, Mr. Bradford.
I just wanted to say that if you develop Tequesta Park as currently planned, you're going to need Paradise Park to be developed because you cannot afford the taxes. Based upon the $8 million job, the annual increase in property taxes would be 6.5% alone. And you're trending on a scale of somewhere between 3.5% to 5% increase in the cost of ad valorem per year, even though you may be able to say that you're not increasing the millage rate. So keep that in mind. But Mayor, you mentioned that the owners of Paradise Park would like an agreement that would state the purchase price in advance of the deadline arriving. You didn't share with us what that purchase price was. It'd be nice of you to let us know what that is, or is it based upon the appraisal that we received?
It's based on the appraisal that we received.
Which is $5 million?
No. That appraisal was incorrect, and we challenged it, and Jeremy and I had conversations with the gentleman who did it, and he made the proper changes, and it actually came in at just slightly over $4.3 million.
4.3, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we're gonna have an item on the agenda to go month to month through the end of November. And as Jeremy said, if we want to then consider making or modifying or changing that motion or that resolution to give us this opportunity, we'll have that opportunity. Otherwise, if we just vote to stay at the end of November, then that will be the end. So, okay, we're all in agreement on that? Okay. All right, that is the end of the agenda for this evening. We're going to adjourn to the shade meeting. Go ahead.
Can I make one quick little
Sure.
recommendation?
Sure.
Is it possible that we can maybe have a workshop every other month? I don't know if that's possible, but I think that there's opportunity for that. And that I would be in favor of slowing it down a little bit and moving workshops every other month.
I think the reason the council went to the workshop approach several years ago was because the feeling was we needed time to flesh out some of these issues in a more casual environment and talk them through before we get to the council meetings. The council meetings already run long enough as it is, so this gives us an opportunity to have some in-depth conversation and hopefully keep the council meetings to a reasonable length of time. I think this process has worked fairly well. I would be in favor of maintaining it as it is, but what's everybody else's desires on this?
Well, it just seems like we're having an awful lot of workshops and we're not getting a whole heck of a lot accomplished, in my opinion. I mean, we keep revisiting some of the things over and over again and stuff, but, you know, you listen to some people and it sounds like, you know, they feel like we've got a lot more to do than what we're even doing now. So, you know, I don't know how, you know, we're going to be able to do all the things that people expect us to do and not have them every month. you know, I certainly, I don't mind it so much, you know, Kyle. I mean, it's, if it's productive. It doesn't seem like, though, that sometimes that they're as productive as I would like for them to be. And I think that's probably the consensus for everyone. You like to be able to feel like your time is being well spent and you're creating, you know, good positive results and stuff from the time. I just like to maybe give it a little bit more thought and see if we can maybe restructure some of the formats and stuff and the way that we're going about the workshops, creating a little bit more detailed criteria of what our goals and stuff are for each item and stuff. Try to get it pinned down so we can make some hard-line decisions, you know, when we have a workshop, so that we walk away with a result rather than just a discussion. So if we can bring it up and have a defined, you know, process so that we wind up with a solution or an answer, you know, from the workshop, then I'm in favor of doing them. And so if we can change the format, maybe we could cut down on some of the workshops that are needed, and we can bring some of these items to a closure much more quickly and more efficiently. So that's kind of what I'd like to see, maybe a different format and maybe be able to reduce them down some.
Molly?
I mean, you guys have all been up here longer than me, so I think the once a month doesn't bother me, and I think, you know, I personally don't see as much progress as I would like to month to month. So I'm worried if we spread it out, then that lack of progress might even get dragged out more. Just because we're not talking, we don't, you know, what's the next step? So it's just, I think if we're not in touch longer and, you know, working with Jeremy up here and brainstorming that, some of these things might get dragged out longer. Which maybe isn't a bad thing, I don't know, but then we're not meeting deadlines sometimes maybe too, so
I actually support the workshops, and when I came on, it actually felt more productive for the residents that we were having workshops because it was a casual setting and it was a way for them to listen where council was going with all the details they would casually discuss without the pressure of voting, and it gave them time, I think, to figure out what they feel about it, and then they could do their analysis. And that's, I feel like that's where we get our public comment at public meetings, is they've had time to reflect as well, or reach out to us at the same time and figure out what is going on. It has been done before, doesn't happen a lot, where if there is not really a lot of pressing matters for as the depth of what needs to be discussed, a workshop has been canceled before. And I want to say it's usually either in the middle of summer or right around the holidays.
December.
And it really just depends on what's going on in the village. We have a lot of projects going on right now. Like, we didn't have these before, like when I first came on, so it was a different setup. And taken away, I understand it does feel like sometimes every week we're in here. My concern with going every other month is there will most likely be something that we really should be discussing as a group casually without the pressure of a vote on it. And the inconsistency. So if we were January and March, if we had a pressing matter we needed to discuss, that workshop would be created, advertised, but the consistency, I think, helps residents know exactly when the meetings are going to be rather than popping up here and there. So I would actually be in favor of keeping them the way they are and then just looking at it based on what is going to be on the agenda. Can we maybe move it to another one and just hold off? Because I think it's easier to cancel than to add.
Well, I mean, I know you were saying, I think the workshops are very, very important, and I think there's a lot of value in them. I see 5 employees here tonight, and I know that only one of them is
A lot of
talked.
time.
And so it is a lot of time and commitment that they've got, or that they didn't volunteer for to take away from their families too. And so I do want to maybe look at organizing it to where we do have an agenda, and it's, maybe we try to stay true to having a time limit on those agendas and knocking this stuff out and having good conversation, but maybe we add 4 things, 5 things on each every other month kind of. I'm just throwing it out there as another idea.
Well, I
It's
think
always good to look at it.
I mean, one of the challenges obviously is the 5 of us can't speak outside of these meetings. So we don't have, as Lori's saying, we don't have that opportunity to converse and hash everything out. And you're right, sometimes it feels like it's maybe not as productive or fast moving as we would like, but that's also because of us, because we might bring different perspectives or different ideas or different thoughts to the table. And, we're all trying to maybe persuade or make our point with each other. And so that's a natural part of the process, I think, in any business or any organization. You're trying to work through things. And we only have these 2 opportunities each month to be able to do that. So, and we want to give everybody a chance to, have their say and voice their opinions. And again, you make a good point, Lori, which is you get to do it without the pressure of a vote. I mean, if you're doing it for the first time at a council meeting, you're immediately going to a vote one way or the other. Maybe it's something you want to spend more time thinking about, like some of the items we've talked about tonight, whether it's Tequesta Park or Paradise Park. Those are items that are, as you said, they're major projects, they're major initiatives. These are things we, haven't necessarily, other than the community center, we haven't undertaken these kinds of things before. Because of the timetables and the legislative sessions, as you said, the process wasn't ideal, but it's what we were forced into because of the circumstances. So we're trying to work through it as best we can, I think, so.
But I would support what Kyle was saying, that we could definitely streamline what the agenda items are. Like, I'm assuming that Mr. Chambers is here because we were talking about parks, and Mr. Hammond, I know he likes to be very involved, but we talked about an item as well that probably pertained to Marlene, but we were provided those information that she would have, the personal days and whatnot. So, I mean, we've done that before in workshops where Jeremy will have to get back to us with information, so we can probably streamline for the employees if they are even on the agenda, if that makes sense.
No,
Like,
I
who's
think we've
not
said in the
here?
past, if there's not an item that affects somebody.
Yeah, like the chiefs aren't here, like they don't need to be here.
They don't need to be here unless it's an item specifically involving their department, so. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.
Can I have a 5-minute break, please?
Yes, absolutely.
I had tea and 5 minutes, please. I have to disconnect all this stuff.
Yeah, quarter. No problem. It'll be interesting.
Hey, Mary Lou's Prince, how you doing? I'm doing good. I'm actually on the city council here in Tequesta in a meeting, and we just finished it up, and we got to go into another little workshop later. But I just wanted to call you rather than sending you a text. I was very impressed with your response in the text that you sent me, and you sound like you're a real gem, and that's what I have heard about you, and it's very impressive to hear that you're so loyal and stuff to and appreciative